I'm going to do a cyanotype. We'll start out with this negative. And this is this is called Dryad. So I get my chemicals from Bostic and Sullivan. They supply chemicals for alternative processes. I can also make my own chemicals. The solution A and solution B is typically 2 parts that are brought together 1-to-1. It's ferric ammonium citrate, which is the light sensitive part, and potassium ferrocyanide, which is the colorant. And when you put those two together, it becomes light sensitive to ultraviolet light only. Fluorescent bulbs do have a little bit of UV light, so I like to work in low lighting conditions when I'm putting together or sensitizing my paper. How I'm going to work now, I'm going to use equal parts of this, and I just need a little bit of water. In doing cyanotype, it's very different than other photographic processes because it doesn't want an alkaline or pH balance environment. It actually needs an acidic environment. So there's only one paper that I have found that I enjoy using, and it's called Arches Platine, and it's not pH balanced. It actually offers an acidic side. My name is Heather Leavitt Martinez. I'm the artist that produced these 3 works and guest artist in the Holga Inspire show. So the bottom print here is a platinum palladium shot with a Holga 120 film. Platinum palladium is platinum based. I make my own emulsion and apply the emulsion with a brush onto the paper. I make a negative that is the size of the print, and I use ultraviolet light to make the exposure. This piece is a cyanotype shot of my friend Elizabeth. The title is called Dryad. It's sort of my version of the Ophelia piece, and it's a triple exposure shot with Holga fisheye, and it's a cyanotype. Because the fisheye nature is a circular nature, it's a circular print. And this piece up here is wet plate collodion titled Egg Beater. It was shot in camera with a Holga, was hacked to shoot wet plate collodion, and that's part of my recently domesticated series. So these pieces are shot with wet plate. This is shot with my half plate turn of the century Japanese camera. And this was shot in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with a model who was just walking by, and I grabbed her and asked her to help me pose the flowers for the image. It's a personal series of works inspired by Dwayne Michaels, and I'm the 4th generation healer in my family, so this is really pays homage to my ancestors who were all in some way massage therapists, physical therapists, and healers. So with each one of my prints, I make printing notes on the back side. This piece is called Dryad. It's printed on platine. We're printing a cyanotype. The original was shot with a Holga 120, and today's date, which is the 15th. I am in Dolores. I always write where I do this. Sometimes, it can be argued that water quality, humidity, barometer, that kind of thing can have an effect, and I'm going to be exposing with the sun. I do have an ultraviolet light box that I use, but in this case we're going to use the sun. I'm using 2 chemicals, potassium ferrocyanide and ferric ammonium citrate, so I'll just say what that is. There we go. And then we're not using tween, but that's something that I use to help embed the emulsion into the paper. I forgot it today, and usually we just use 1 drop, so it's not a big deal. And then I have my exposure. So that's the back side. On the front side, I'm going to be using my negative. Though it was shot originally 120 with Holga, I've enlarged the negative and used an image setter to create the larger negative because we're going to use it as a contact print. So I'm going to center it, just kind of eyeball it, and then make some very light pencil marks just to get a sense to where I'm going to be brushing. Because this isn't square, we're going to brush the emulsion on into a circle. And the reason why the format of the image is a circle is because I shot it with fisheye lens. Like many artists, I started out working in alternative processes using cyanotype, which was really made famous by an artist named Anna Atkins, who was the first botanical photographer, and she was the first woman to get published with her photography from the 1850s, and she used the cyanotype method. These images are similar to hers in that they are photograms, so I place the actual flower onto the cyanotype emulsion that I spread onto the paper and use ultraviolet light, the sun, to make the exposure. So this too is a cyanotype, however this was shot with a Holga, and this particular piece was shot with really hot film that had been in my camera for months. It was warped, and so it came out and printed this way, and the actual negative is this size. I blew up the negative in order to make a contact print in cyanotype. And so here's the same image, but in platinum palladium. And then I have, so these are all part of the Memories, Dreams, and Fears series. This one's called Funky Toes. So sometimes I use models, sometimes my work is space-based. So these were shot at Navy Pier in Chicago. And so these two are platinum palladium, and I also have those in cyanotype to your right here. These happen to be that two images worked side by side. Holga is very challenging to shoot, and you don't always get a whole roll of pictures that turn out, but when I get two that are side by side, I do print them together. They also have a little bit more of conversation, and then once I started doing that, I did these two together because of the relationship between time, clocks, trains. You know, trains are always on this certain time schedule. It was just the relationship in shape and idea with those. Regarding Instagram, I have Instagram on my camera. I rarely use it, only if I just happen to have my camera and I want to take a picture, but I've never used that for any kind of exhibition or shared it on Facebook in a way that shows this is my art. It's not that I don't consider that art. It's sort of like the first time I met someone that learned Photoshop and they said, wow, for some reason it's like a digital darkroom, but they didn't realize that it was actually based on the darkroom. A lot of the functions in Photoshop are based on the darkroom, and I think a lot of users of Instagram just don't understand alternative processes. They just think that they make cool images. So I'm a little biased, but that's just because I know the chemistry and the alchemy and a lot of the mystery and a lot of the techniques behind working in alternative processes. And actually I haven't really seen that good of an Instagram filter that really shows cyanotype or some of the processes that I work in. This brush is a specific brush for cyanotype. I've been using it since, looks like 2009, and all of my alternative processes, each brush is specifically for that process. This is an iron-based salt process. It has to use this brush. Other brushes may have platinum, silver, palladium, or other heavy metals in them, so I have to be careful. You want your brush wet but not soaking, so I have to give it a little bit of, get it wet but then take some of the moisture out. And I want it to be just a kiss of wet dampness on my hand, so that's ready to go. I'm gonna now mix my chemicals here, again using ferric ammonium citrate and potassium ferrocyanide. These chemicals are not toxic in any way unless they come in contact with citric acid. Then the potassium ferrocyanide can have a gaseous cyanide effect. We're not worried about that. We're going to do 10 drops of each. Let's make it 15, since I don't have my tween. So that's the ferric ammonium citrate. That's the light sensitive part of the solution. And the potassium ferrocyanide is also called Prussian blue. It's what gives the image the blue color. So I just put my emulsion on, mix it up in a shot glass, and remember we're doing a circle, so I want to get the basic outline, and then I just got to move the emulsion around. I'm not pressing too hard because I don't want it to affect the surface of the paper, but wherever you see a slight brush stroke, and you may not be able to see it in this lighting, that'll end up turning blue. Wherever the negative doesn't have dark, it'll turn blue, and it'll be white of the paper wherever the negative is lying. So when there's maybe I'll lose a bristle or get a little bit of a hair or a piece of lint in there, I don't want to put the emulsion back over it because it'll kind of coat it. So I'll just leave it until it's dry, and then when it's dry, I'll just flick it off. And the way I know that my paper's dry is not just from surface. I don't ever want to touch it because the oil on my hands will affect the emulsion. I listen. So if I listen to the paper as I bend it, it sounds really deep and low. And in about 10-15 minutes this will dry and it'll have a much higher pitched sound to it. So this sound is the sound I'm listening for. And so from here, I just put it sort of in a dark place, maybe just so the direct light isn't hitting it. I can just put it up against this wall here and we'll let that dry for about 10 minutes. So I'm using a 11 by 14 inch print frame that I had custom made through Bostic and Sullivan. They'll make any size that you want. I have another one that's 20 by 24 inches for my larger prints. And I have an 8 by 10 for smaller and field work. This is the paper that I sensitized. You can hear the difference in the sound. A little bit higher of a pitch. And I know that it's dry because the back isn't cool anymore. And so using this sensitized paper up, and I put the deckled edge along the bottom of my piece in case when it's framed people want to float it rather than mat it. It's not easy to, unless you want to mat it in a circle or put it in a square. So I place the negative directly on top of the emulsion and I choose where that's going to lie, kind of center it a little bit and get it somewhat straight. And then flip it upside down into the print frame. This one side in and lock it down. When I flip it over, I just check to make sure that the negative is where I intended it to be and that there aren't any hairs, lint, or anything in the glass. Now we can go outside. I have about 7 different Holga cameras, but this is the one that I primarily shoot with. It's the Holga 120. Holgas are plastic cameras made in China, invented by Mr. Lee in 1982. People think that they're a vintage camera, and they sort of are, but they still make them today. They make them with plastic lenses, glass lenses, and with lots of different features. I have a Polaroid back, though it doesn't take Polaroid film, it takes instant Fuji film, and I have lots of different lenses that I can put onto my Holga. So I'm shooting you with a Holga with an instant film back, and I'm shooting 3000 speed film. It takes about 15 seconds to develop. This Holga has a fixed lens of f11. Shutter speed is fixed at 100, and so hopefully with this lighting we can get a good exposure using this 3000 speed instant film. Because there's no viewfinder, I have no idea I don't know what the composition's gonna be. I don't know how this is gonna turn out, how far away. Yeah, that's about right. You never know what it's gonna be in the picture. It's a fixed lens at f11 at 100 speed film. Or 100 is the shutter speed, and the film speed is 3000.
Speed is 3000.
Yeah. And it takes 15 seconds to develop.
So I get to see the results.
Yeah. There he is. What a good looking man.
Hey.
Wow. Holga makes a couple of different fisheye lenses. This is a glass fisheye for Holga. It's made in Japan for a Chinese camera. And we literally just put it on and screw it to as an attachment. That's it. Okay, shooting you this way. Wait, let me do that again. Right. I think it's been 15. Doesn't take long in this weather. There you go. I haven't found that overexposed or overdeveloping really makes much of a difference by a few seconds, but under will. And so when I peel off the corner, I'm really looking to see if the corner is black, and then I know it's good. I'm gonna pull this out. And then is everybody in the picture? Let me see here. I have really short arms. So we're gonna open this up. We're looking for a black corner. If it were any more gray than that, then I would say that it's underdeveloped. Oh my gosh, look, I've got 3 chins.
I don't know how you did that.
It was yellow, and now it's gonna start to turn a lime green, and it's gonna start turning sort of a darker green, and also into a sage green. Right now it's getting dark, and when it hits the sage green, then we'll know that it's close. We can take it inside and see if we got a good exposure from it. Sometimes I'll tilt the piece to face the sun a little bit more. I want to get at least 5 minutes though, and we're only at 2 minutes. We did get a little bit of ambient exposure in the shade, and what I've found is that if I get some ambient exposure in the shade, it actually creates a more contrasty print. And that's because the ultraviolet light is seeping in a little bit slower, and it's getting deeper. And now we're really starting to see a shift in color. It's getting a lot lighter.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna take this print out. First we'll take a look at it just to see if we've got a good exposure, and that looks good. I've got a range there. And all it takes to expose is ultraviolet light, and all it takes to develop is water. So we'll take it to the water bath. And here you'll see a pretty big shift in color. What's gonna happen is where the image is exposed, it's sort of turning a gray color, will start to turn blue. And where the negative was, you can start to see the blue lift up off the paper. And this appears that we got a pretty, maybe overexposed here because I lost a lot of detail, but it's all right. I'm going to add a little bit of hydrogen peroxide as toner. I'm going to tilt this a bit. And then you'll begin to see the toning process. That's a nice print.
She goes out after the curtain falls.
Rinse for 20 minutes and then let it dry. We're done. If we had overexposed, all of these mid-tone areas would be completely dark, and then the white would be blown out, but we've got a little bit of skin tone here. This is a triple exposure, so she's not going to be sharp in her face and hair at all, but we do have some nice detail here. We just got a nice exposure there, which is surprising because on cloudy days, it's hit or miss. So the difference, you asked me what makes it a good print. This image, we lost a lot of detail in the hair and the area down here, but it's clearly here. It will dry down a little bit, but I think we've got a good print in this one here. Ooh, you missed out on all the action.
What's that?
You missed out on all the action. But you can watch the video, I'm sure.
Well, this is already done, wasn't it?
No, that's what we made today.
Oh,
That's a new one.
okay.
How's that?
Well, help if I pick these things off.
Yeah. You have a place where we can dry it, hang it up. Do you hang your prints?
Well, I can do that, or I have.
She turns thoughts into kingdoms and boys into kings.